Chinese are too busy encircling Taiwan as we speak. Okay?
They're not encircling Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China. And that's been absolutely accepted by the whole of the international community since 1948. And if you don't know that, you're not reading enough. Go and read about it.
That's Roger Waters. He's the co-founder of Pink Floyd and apparently an expert on China, Taiwan, and Asian affairs. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch here. And of course, the song that I played, I feel like whenever I have Stephen Yates on, I just got to do as much fist in the air stuff as absolutely possible. It's Beijing Evening News by IN3, one of the bands and songs banned by China since 2015 because they sing about the injustices of communism and the inequality that it creates. And Stephen Yates joins us now. As you can see, Trump's very excited behind him, giving him 2 thumbs up. If you're watching the simulcast of the radio show on the First or YouTube or Facebook, Stephen, so good to see you. First off, I just really want to get your expert thought to expert Roger Waters' proclamation there, because this is an ongoing debate. You broke it down brilliantly last week. I had so much feedback. I've never had more feedback to any guest response than what I got from you last week when you gave the history lesson in 30 seconds or less. I just wanted you to react to Roger Waters, though.
Well, I wish him well in going back to being comfortably numb. I love Pink Floyd music. I do not turn to them for the philosophy to run the world. And Roger Waters has actually been on the wrong side of a number of different foreign policy issues. Might come as a shock to the audience. Some of us are on the younger end of Pink Floyd fandom. But no, I mean, this is just another example. I mean, his imploring that people read. Well, if he would like to read, in 1948, actually, the Republic of China was the China he would be referring to. That's the government that fled to Taiwan and is there now. So if he'd like to continue reading, he might go actually talk with the government that was ruling China in 1948 that he mistakenly identified. Ooh. And maybe continue his research and taking in whatever chemicals led him to that comfortably numb state, which was an outstanding song.
I think you're going to have to get a new microphone because you're not supposed to throw them on the floor that hard. I just have to say. Talking to our friend Stephen Yates, and in case I didn't properly introduce him because I was really excited to get his soundbite there. He's senior fellow at America First Policy Institute and chair of the China Policy Initiative. I don't know of anyone out there who knows these issues better. He also ran Radio Free Asia. The commies didn't like him and tried to lobby him out of his position. He's dialed into this. He's advised previous administrations on this. Was Nancy Pelosi's visit, and I know that was last week's news cycle, and everyone else is focused on the next new shiny thing, but was her visit in your mind? I haven't seen a lot of postmortems on this. Was it a success? What was she there to achieve?
Well, I don't think she was very clear about what she was there to achieve, at least in advance. And I thought one rule of kind of politics and policy 101 is you say what you're going to do, you do it, and then you tell people that you did it and why you did it. She seemed to do parts of the here I am and then afterwards, this is why I did it part. And she said to stand by Taiwan's democracy, something that I can't really object to. But one of the things that was very troubling about it, most of all to me, was that it showed really significant daylight between the White House and the Congress. And I don't blame the Congress for that. I'm not usually one to call in and say Nancy Pelosi did a good job, and I'm not doing that today. But I can say that the distance that was there was 100% caused by weakness in the White House. We had all these leaks suggesting she shouldn't go and that our generals were concerned. Well, I certainly hope that they're concerned about the communist Chinese. I certainly hope that it sobers them up and gets them off of their politically correct soapbox to get back to preparing for a potential fight to win, because America is not about declaring war on China. Taiwan isn't doing anything to upset the status quo either. It's all driven by China. And if they pick the fight, I want us to be ready to win. And I don't think the wokeistas in the military are the way to go.
No, I would agree with that. Talking with our friend Stephen Yates, how would you characterize the support from other Asian countries, South Korea, Japan, you have Vietnam, towards Taiwan and in this Chinese aggression towards Taiwan's sovereignty? I mean, I would imagine that they're supportive of Taiwan's sovereignty, knowing the history, but I also understand China's dominance in the area.
Yeah, so for a country like Vietnam, Obviously, we need not forget that they are run by a communist party. And so that might give a certain indication of their allegiance. However, Vietnam is one of those countries that China, under the communists, has actually invaded. And so they don't really like their neighbor to the north that much, or trust their neighbor to the north. And so all of the encroachment on these sea claims, the Vietnamese are on the side of the free world and would support Taiwan. They're not open about supporting Taiwan sovereignty, though. Japan is the most open and assertive. As I've tried to educate people in the last week or so, Taiwan was a 50-year-long colony of Japan. There's people who speak Japanese as a native language in Japan. They have an Aboriginal population that deserves to have a say. So all this, they've always been Chinese because they serve Chinese food across the country. I thought it was hilarious. Someone said, well, there's a world record number of KFCs all across China. And I guess Kentucky's coming to claim their sovereignty back. So, there's got a whole host of things that are all messed up in the way people think and talk about this. But in Asia, most are on the right side. I think Korea was a little bit off in that they didn't really even receive Speaker Pelosi by the highest levels.
Yeah,
and then
that
the foreign
was
minister,
weird.
who's a friend of mine, is in Beijing now.
He was staycationing. That was I read that the leader of South Korea was on a staycation and he couldn't receive Pelosi.
I get it. It's August. We should all take vacation. But, when you're the president, I didn't know that you got to pull that off quite so easy. And in Asia, usually the polite form of a stiff arm is to say something is inconvenient right now.
Ooh, so that should we be worried about that?
Well, the alliance with Korea has been, I'd say, a little bit shakier over the recent decades than, as I've frequently referred to, Japan and some of the others. South Korea was much more open to direct negotiations with North Korea in past administrations, and somewhat would engage in anti-American rhetoric supporting their protesters. But that's just because South Koreans tend to be at the bottom of a well of their own domestic politics, and it plays out in funny ways. They're great fighters who have stood by America when it mattered, but in recent decades, they've caught a little of their own version of political correctness and playing a little nicer with the communists in China than they should.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And I've always kind of wondered about what kind of relationship they would have, because their obviously history with Japan and China are quite different from ours. And I think it's a little bit more difficult for the average American to kind of get into the analysis from that South Korean perspective and how they should receive or support United States. They've got their own interests, but at the same time, Chinese domination is bad for everyone. Speaking of the Chinese domination, I was reading this piece. Actually, it wasn't really so much a piece. It was just a map showing where they're doing all of these staging these drills. It's the goofiest thing, Stephen, I've ever seen. So Beijing sent, all of a number of their ships, and they've had planes, a number of planes that went into Taiwanese airspace. They've surrounded the island to carry out their military exercises and conduct live fire drills. Is that just Xi Jinping trying to salvage kind of a loss of, he lost a little bit to Nancy Pelosi because she completed her trip to Taiwan and left, and they didn't do anything after all their bluster?
Well, I think that they were planning to do a lot of these things anyway. I think that the speaker's visit may have amplified them. Maybe it even moved them up on a calendar. But they had, I think, pretty aggressive political warfare and military coercive measures planned. It's not like they could do this on an on-off switch. That Pelosi's trip was happening and we'll just sort of zip these things out there. They were planning this for months. So this recent trip by Pelosi was coincident with People's Liberation Army Day. They were always going to have muscular, militaristic videos and exercises. They have an important party Congress coming up in October. They're going to always push some muscular stuff out around that. And so I think that they were planning to do these things anyway. And certainly their aggression is not driven by us. It's driven by their own calculus. And so I think that they're picking moments of opportunity to amplify it. The thing is, really for America, are we going to sober up that we can't trust these guys? They're not interested in being reassured. The White House bent over backwards to reassure them, we don't seek Taiwan independence. Well, how about we pressure them to say, you shouldn't seek to shoot your neighbors? And that's, maybe a starting point for a pro-American readjustment to foreign policy. Take it out of the hands of the egghead experts and put it in the hands of common sense Americans and our friends abroad that are prepared to fight for themselves. Let them. Get out of their way. Let them.
Yeah. Our talking with Stephen Yates, who is an expert in this area, and as you know, he's with the America First Policy Institute. All of these headlines, Stephen, about China could invade Taiwan, and it looks like it may happen sooner rather than later. Is that just renewed interest in the tensions going on between China and Taiwan due to Pelosi's visit, or has there been something that has changed in the past, year or so that we've been talking about this to indicate that they may actually be putting action to words?
This is something they've been telling themselves for 30 to 40 years. And early in that time, they knew they didn't have the capability to do it. Now they know they have the capability to do it. It doesn't take that much in order to attack and invade. It takes much more to try to control a territory, to subdue their population and hold it. I don't think they have a prayer at doing all of that, but they can do a lot of damage to Taiwan, to themselves, to us and our allies without having to do all of that. That's the real risk we have. Yeah. A lot of experts will game out, what about invasion scenarios? They don't have to invade. Blocking the ports, turning the lights out, slowing down the semiconductor manufacturing pipeline, all of that hurts a lot of people, a lot of livelihoods who are already smashed by the reaction to COVID. And so we can't really endure too many more smackdowns on these supply chains before we have real trouble. So that's why I think we can't afford to just let this go on inertia. We're going to have to kind of get more sensible about supporting people out there to defend themselves. And we've got to get more sensible about strategically decoupling from supply chains in China. It's not really us doing something to them. They've said unambiguously how they see us and how they're going to treat us. And it's about time we started responding in kind.
They've not been ambiguous. We have. Last question for you. Stephen Yates, looking to the other side of the world, another $45.5 billion going towards Ukraine announced today. This on the heels of more billions that went to Ukraine just like I think a month and a half ago. Are we monitoring where this money goes, and are we going to get a return on our investment? Because I don't see what that would be.
I think that is the biggest problem with that entire enterprise. I mean, we've talked about this literally for months, that the main problem is allowing Europeans to fall short of their own obligation to take care of other Europeans. But I think there's a major question about, does anyone really know where this is all going? And I don't look at the Ukrainian people and their government as being infallible. No one on this planet is. We should be asking questions always when this much is going somewhere. This is more money than we're spending to protect our border and protect Americans ourselves. It could be beefing up our military for dealing with other challenges in other parts of the world. All of this comes at an opportunity cost. And at this point, I don't know anyone who can say at a straight face that it's not being, unfortunately, wasted. And so that's what I thought was Congress's first responsibility to the taxpayer. I don't know whether they can kind of revive that as something to pledge allegiance to going forward. But I honor the people of Ukraine for standing up for themselves. We're advocating others do that in other parts of the world. But throwing unaccounted for money at a problem is simply the worst possible way.
Exactly. Stephen Yates at YatesComms on Twitter. Always appreciate your expertise. Don't know what we would do without you, my friend. We're glad to have your reasoning out there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Coming from the Oval Office, no less.
There you
Thanks,
go.
Dana.
Thumbs up behind him. Trump approves. Thank you, sir. Take care.